Okay, now, this basically asked you guys to sketch some angles, sketch the reference angles, and compare the sines and cosines and tangents of each of them, okay? And what I wanted you to see by that was the difference in the signs. Not sign, but as in positive or negative sign. Does that make sense? So I picked out one. This is a quadrant 3 angle. This is a quadrant 2 angle. And this is a quadrant 4 angle. So I'll do each one of those. You guys tell me though. I mean, I'm not going to sit here. So 220 degrees. That should be somewhere right about there. So there's theta equal to 220 degrees. Then the reference angle, you said, okay, well, let me drop a perpendicular to the x-axis, and how much is that space? That space is going to be 40 degrees. So the reference angle, beta, is 40 degrees. They usually call reference angles beta, right? You remember that from the video? So you had to do the sine of 220, and what was that? Negative 0.6? Negative 0.8, what was it? Negative 0.6. And then you have to do the sine of 40. Tell me what that is, please. Positive 0.6. Cosine of 220?
Negative 0.8.
And sine of 220.
0.8.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Tangent, cosine of... Get back there. The cosine of 40 was 0.8. Okay, and then the tangent should have been 0.6 over 0.8, or what, the negative 0.75?
Yeah, 0.8 for both.
Tangent is negative 0.8 for both.
Oh, it wasn't negative.
Okay?
No, it wasn't.
And it wasn't negative, it was positive? Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's probably true. So we went and we did all of these, and here's the important part. They all had the same absolute value, right? It was either positive and positive or positive and negative, but they all had the same absolute value. They might have been opposites, maybe not. So what we want to make sure we understand is why they were either opposites or not. So, let's draw a unit circle real quick. See if we can't figure this out. If I drew an angle in quadrant 1, do you guys remember that x was the cosine and y was the sine? If I draw any angle in the first quadrant on the unit circle, there's an x and a y coordinate. And on the unit circle, we said because the hypotenuse is 1, the adjacent side, which is the x coordinate, is also the cosine of your angle. The opposite side is the sine of your angle. Well, the x coordinate here is positive, and the y coordinate is also positive, correct? And if you look at any of your first quadrant angles, everything's positive. But if I take an angle and I say, okay, let me sketch this angle in the second quadrant. So let's make the terminal side of the angle finish there in quadrant 2. Is the cosine positive or negative in quadrant 2?
Negative.
It's negative because x is the cosine. So here in quadrant 2, the x is negative. How about the y?
Ah.
Okay. Now how about quadrant 3? Let's do it in blue. What's the x coordinate? Don't just blurt it out. Is the x coordinate positive or negative?
Negative.
It's negative. It's to the left of the y-axis. How about the y coordinate?
Negative.
So both are negative there. Don't forget, this is the cosine, that's the sine. Cosine, sine. Now let's go to the fourth quadrant. I hope this is starting to make sense for you. What's my cosine in the fourth quadrant? Easy. It's to the right of the y-axis. So what's the x-coordinate?
Positive.
Positive. So your cosine is positive. How about your y-coordinate?
Negative.
And then when we did the first quadrant, we said positive and positive for cosine and sine. Okay? So now let's do our tangents. Now remember, the tangent is the opposite over the adjacent, or the y over the x, or the sine over the cosine. So let's start thinking about where the tangent is positive. So we're going to look at y divided by x, or sine divided by cosine. A positive divided by a positive is, so the tangent's positive in the first quadrant. A positive divided by a negative, so the tangent is negative in the second quadrant. A negative divided by a negative, the tangent is positive. And then a negative divided by a positive, the tangent is going to be negative. Okay? Does that make sense? Tana, don't go to the light. Are you okay? Are you good? All right. Now, so if we say, what quadrants is the sine negative? The sine is negative below the x-axis, which is quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Where's the cosine negative? To the left of the y-axis, quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. And the tangent is negative in quadrant 2 and quadrant 4. Now the secant, you just got to kind of figure the secant is the inverse, not the inverse, the reciprocal of the cosine. So wherever the cosine is going to be negative, so is the secant. So the secant is going to be negative in Q2 and Q3. And take a second and fill in the cosecant, which is going to match up with the sine, and the cotangent, which is going to match up with the tangent. Okay? Any questions?
They're all going to be the same as the sine.
Right, because if you think about it, if you take negative 2 and flip it upside down, it's still negative. It's still negative 1/2. But so when you take the reciprocal keeps the sign. If I have negative 1/3 and I flip it, it's going to be negative 3. And it keeps the sign for those. Okay? We good? All right. Now,